Hey everyone, welcome back to Kubrick Corner with me, Sean Wilson. So there's a new Charles Dickens adaptation out, The Personal History of David Copperfield, based on the author's 1850 book, which he famously regarded as his favourite child. This was Dickens's favourite of all his novels, so therefore there is a lot of attendant pressure on the film adaptation. This is actually the first live action movie adaptation of the novel for 50 years, and it's now brought to the big screen by writer director Armando Iannucci, master British satirist famous for the likes of The Thick of It and its movie spin-off In the Loop, and also Veep, and then going way back when he was one of the co-creators of Alan Partridge, is played by Steve Coogan, famous for having quite a scabrous, pointed, dark sense of humour. I mean, anyone who's seen The Thick of It will know that. Interestingly, however, when it comes to the personal history of David Copperfield, what Iannucci has actually done is he's played down a lot more of the sober, darker aspects of the book, and he's instead played up the kind of joyful, farcical, freewheeling comedy of it. This is a movie that is almost like a ray of sunshine. It's actually one of the happiest movies I've seen in a very, very long time. So as per the book, David Copperfield is our narrator through his life. He guides us through his life. He has basically authored the events that have made him who he is. The movie starts with a brilliantly Dickensian flourish in which we see David, as played in really endearing fashion by Dev Patel, addressing an audience from a podium where he is doing a live reading of the book that will become known as David Copperfield. He then walks through the backdrop into the scene of his own birth, and what you get is the constant sort of imposition of the narrator on the story, which again reinforces one of the key themes of the book, which is when it came to the novel, Dickens interwove a very, very complex tapestry of fact and fiction. A lot of David Copperfield was based on the experiences in Charles Dickens' own life, and trying to discern the kind of dividing line between what was real in his own life and what was made up is it's a very complicated marriage between that and the more fantastical made up elements. And Iannucci, through the visual language of the film, plays it up again by having David himself, as played by Dev Patel, invade certain scenes. There are also lots of other wonderful flourishes as well. There's like a Monty Python-esque scene in which a hand comes through the top of a scene to basically bring it to a close, and then we go on with something else. There's also one of my favourite moments from the book when David gets absolutely blind drunk with his friends, and in the film that plays out at double the speed, almost in the manner of like a silent movie. And the brilliant use of visual language to tell this story, I think, is great. I mean, Iannucci hasn't exactly done very many movies. I mean, he did In the Loop and he did The Death of Stalin, which was very, very dark and very acidic, but this shows a wonderful kind of joy and tactility in the direction. And what the film does, as per the book, is it picks up with David as a baby and then as a child, devoted to his mother and to his housekeeper Peggotty. His mother then marries the cruel Mr. Murdstone, who then sends David off to a bottling factory. David's mother then dies in his absence in actually one of the film's more anguished scenes, and then that sends David on a voyage of discovery to first go and find his eccentric aunt Betsy Trotwood, played by Tilda Swinton, who lives with her companion Mr. Dick, Hugh Laurie, who is kind of fixated on the history of Charles I, whether Charles I lost his head, and there seems to be some kind of emotional manifestation of some kind of problems going on in Mr. Dick's life. As Betsy herself says, Mr. Dick is very discerning. He can kind of see people maybe in the way that other characters in the story can't. So there's a lovely sense of empathy and awareness of the characters of the book. And then from there we trace David's path from adolescence to adulthood, through how he starts to work in legal practice, all the various other characters with whom he interacts, including brilliantly Ben Whishaw as Uriah Heep, who is the kind of unctuous, oily, patently false clerk who crosses paths with David and who comes across this obsequious kind of servile air, but you know that it's all a facade and that basically Uriah Heep inveigles his way into the lives of David's associates, and that then plays a very important role later on. Uriah Heep is kind of like a parasitic creature almost, which is interesting given that we have the Bong Joon-ho movie Parasite coming out, which kind of grapples with similar themes along those lines. And I had to say, I thought the film was wonderful. It shows a real reverence for the text, but it doesn't treat the text as a sacred cow. There is a lot of the book that is left out. And then there are elements that are of the book that are transposed onto other scenes and characters. For example, you have the omission of those who read the book will know more about this. But for example, there is a character called Rosa Dartle in the book who isn't in the film, but they've taken a characteristic of her, which is the way Dickens describes it brilliantly in the book, is that she has a scar on her lip that fills with colour during moments of rage. Dartle isn't in the book, but they've taken that and they've transposed that onto the character of the mother of Steerforth, who is David's close friend. He's played in the movie by Anya and Barnard. So you have this sort of loyalty to the text, loyalty to the tone of the text, but it does change things around. I mean, famously, what it does is the movie deploys what is now being referred to as colourblind casting. It's cast actors of colour when one might not necessarily have associated actors of colour with said roles. Obviously, chief among equals, first among equals, is Dev Patel, who is brilliant as David. Clearly, I mean, Dickens wrote the character as a white man, but what this does is this colourblind casting allows actors who might not have got a chance to play these roles before to step into these roles, and ultimately it's based on the merit of the actors rather than their ethnicity or their background. And I think it's done very matter-of-factly in the film. It's not flagged up in a moralistic, heavy-handed way. It's just, this is the way it is. This is a multiracial, colourblind universe. Just accept it. And I think that all of the actors are brilliantly chosen in this. They're almost like Fizz sketches writ large. Fizz is in the artist who illustrated Dickens's novels. Just the way they hold themselves, the way that the actors grapple with the very complicated physical comedy of it. There are a lot of scenes where characters will often pile into a scene quite haphazardly, but obviously it's all worked out with metronomic timing, and almost reminded me of like Fawlty Towers actually, a lot of ways. That sense of farce, that sense of how much more ridiculous is this scene going to get. And I thought it was a lovely film. I think there are problems, I have to be honest, in the last 20 minutes when the film has to actually start wrapping up many of the story threads. There is a bit of a rush towards the end of the story, and I think that as a result some of the nuance is either lost or it's just kind of rushed through. But I think ultimately in the end the film works because it's got a real heart to it. It is basically a very universal story about how we are all the sum total of our own experiences, and you know, that is a story, that's a theme that has always chimed and will continue to chime. Dickens did it particularly beautifully in the novel of David Copperfield, and now Iannucci has translated that theme onto the big screen beautifully. I think it's really well anchored by Dev Patel, who is wonderful. It's just a very happy film. It'll put you in a good mood. It certainly put me in a good mood. I feel like I'm in a good mood just reviewing the film here for you now. So The Personal History of David Copperfield is out now in UK cinemas. Drop me a comment here at Kubrick Corner if you've seen it, and I'll see you soon. Bye.